This is Civil Discourse Now. My name is Mark Small. I'm an attorney in Indianapolis. My co-host is Paul Ogden, also an attorney here in Indianapolis. Our guests today are George Brenner. He has 38 years experience in clinical addictions as a licensed clinical social worker with a master's degree in psychology. Randy is executive director of Drugfree Marion County, a not-for-profit located here in Indianapolis. Randy, I kind of went off there for a little bit in the first segment on legalization. What's your response? What's your take on things?
Well, and this is coming somewhat from an organizational perspective, because Drugfree Marion County tends to focus, as George knows, on sort of the prevention side. And one of our concerns about legalization in many forms is, even when you look at the legal drugs, alcohol and tobacco, the issues that we have with the number of young people under 18 who are legal that use those substances is a concern. And what we tend to find, and what really sort of jumps to the top of our radar screen when we talk about legalizing even marijuana, is that it's studies over and over have shown, not just for young people, but especially for young people because of the way they think, that as their perception of the risk of harm from something goes down, their use goes up. It's already starting to happen with marijuana. And because we've seen, in fact, the interesting study that's been done within the last couple of years shows that our young people now perceive tobacco as more dangerous than marijuana. Some may say, well, it is. And, I'm not going to argue whether someone wants to take that opinion, but the fact is that we've had a switch in that perception. And if you think about it, obviously they've been hearing for a number of years, and we're in the midst here in Indianapolis of banning it from public places, tobacco. But at the same time, we've seen here locally in the city and in the state over the last few years, and nationally, marijuana use rates going up at youth levels.
Yeah, but you can't bake tobacco into brownies.
That's right.
I guess you could.
You
but,
could.
It just would...
I'll leave that one there. So our concern is, and the other thing is that we know statistically that there's now 16 states that have approved medical marijuana in some form. The most recent, I think, was Delaware. But of those first 15, 10 of those 15 have the highest youth use rates of marijuana now. The top 5 are all the states that approve medical marijuana. So our concern from the prevention side is if we look at legalizing marijuana and especially other drugs, then we're going to see youth use rates go up.
Randy, is the marijuana that is out there now, is that different from the marijuana in Mark's day that he might have partaken in?
Yeah, it's got higher levels of THC.
That's one thing I heard, that it's much stronger.
Oh yeah.
I only know anecdotally, but the marijuana in the 1970s was essentially, I'd say, a domestic blend that was not something that would smother you so that your brains would melt into your shoes.
It was mixed.
There was some that was not. I mean, there was some that was. You could almost see the droplets of resin on flower tops before you put it wherever you would put it, anecdotally. But far less prevalent than the $15 bag of Mexican.
Yeah.
That was kind of a pleasant buzz.
But Vietnam was still going on, and so they imported as well as then what was happening in terms of Central American markets. It was already starting to see a significant increase. When we look at other countries that have legalized it, you see significant increase in healthcare concerns with legalization, because as you manufacture and quality control, is you oftentimes for marketing purposes and sales purposes increase the drug effect.
But see, one thing that I would want in my model of legalization, there would be no advertising. There would be no promotional thing. And I know that's silly.
Well, that's a regulation. That's a legal issue.
Now, see, that's what you were addressing at the beginning of the program, and I think is a valid point to raise. I don't think it should just, I'm talking about all drugs being able to be purchased legally, but there would be restrictions on them similar to alcohol, so that you wouldn't have companies able to advertise and blanket places with, smoke Acapulco Gold, like Cheech and Chong did on their...
Like in California.
Well, there's advertising out there. I don't think that that's right. I don't think that there should be any substance that people use that should be advertised in such a way as to encourage its use, which is the whole point of advertising anyway. Camel Joe was a bad idea. That was advocating people smoke cigarettes. Just have a government shop where you can go in and buy, that the companies are going to make a
Go
profit.
back to Randy's point, though, and I want to, I mean, so you're sort of looking at it, why not regulate it and look at the legal issues as a pharmaceutical drug? Because that, in fact, that's what Randy's talking about. It's a pharmaceutical. And look at how heavily regulated drug companies are and pharmaceutical Medicaid, because that's what Randy's saying, is as folks start to perceive it as safe, you see significant increases of use and significant consequences.
And here's the thing. Ultimately, people have a right to choose to use those drugs. The consequences to the society as a whole of drugs being illegal, in terms of cost-benefit analysis, yeah, fine. Right now, drug users are actually in a majority in the United States because people in the United States, a majority of people, over 50%, have used illegal drugs. That was because of the 1960s and 70s and the aftermath. But ultimately, if a person chooses to use a drug, they should be able to choose to use it not as a pharmaceutical setting. If they want to do it recreationally, marijuana should be there. They should be able to use it. That should be their choice. By making it illegal, we have far more problems.
To go back to Randy's point,
Yes.
and this is the issue of what we call in the medical world informed consent. I'm going to tell you a story.
Okay.
I was at the state fair a couple of years ago, and I was walking down the aisle, looking at the booths, and Normal had a booth. And I was approached by a child that looked to be 9 or 10 years of age.
NORML is National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws.
I was approached by a child that looked about 9 or 10 years old, and he was telling me all the benefits of marijuana and hemp, and was telling me about the clothes that can manufacture. And so I proceeded, since he was doing the marketing for Normal, I asked him, I said, well, can you tell me about the effects of tetrahydrocannabinol, which is the pharmaceutical drug effect? And he said, no. And I said, is one of those folks your parents? And I said, yes, why don't you go ask them about the effects, potential effects of tetrahydrocannabinol. It speaks to what Randy's talking about. The kids are at a certain age at which they're starting to use drugs, which is about 12 to 15, are not able to make informed consent. And if we have this perception that it's a perfectly safe thing to do, we will have significant health care issues.
But I'm not saying it's perfectly safe, and I'm not saying that we should, as we legalize it, say it's perfectly safe. We should just have it legalized because for it to be illegal, we have tens of billions of dollars that we spend on prisons and on prosecutions of individuals. We have billions of dollars in the criminal justice system spent in part to people like Paul and me, because we're attorneys and we represent people in court, partly to folks in your profession. Randy, you're in a not-for-profit, so but a lot of people make money because drugs are illegal, as well as the people who are in the illicit sales and marketing of it. Those aren't going away. We can minimize it, but the war against drugs just hasn't worked and isn't going to work. And if we legalize it and have an age barrier, sure, there are going to be kids getting hold of drugs, but kids get hold of alcohol now. We just can't educate them as well and tell them some of the real things about the other drugs because, well, they're illegal. And they're illegal and you can't use them.
I think we actually have a consensus on the panel that there would be, maybe not with Mark, but maybe so, the health consequences of legalization would be more, but I think what Mark and I are saying is you have to look at all the consequences. The fact is you've got higher cost of drugs, you've got people breaking into people's houses to get money to buy cocaine or whatever. I mean, I'd rather have them rotting their brains than breaking into my house and stealing my valuable TV. So I think perhaps because of your professions that you're focused more on the health consequences. And certainly those are out there.
They're not unrelated, though. I mean, I remember 7 years ago when I was in Amsterdam reading articles about the potency of the drug and the increase of crimes related to the fact that people were not particularly interested in working and were involved in petty crimes related to the procurement in order to have the money to buy a legal drug called marijuana.
Yeah, but it's not legal in the Netherlands. It's not legal. They don't enforce the law. The closest that anybody has in Europe to legalization of drugs is Portugal, which decriminalized in, I think, like 2001. They've had, the stats over there for Portugal show that there hasn't been a spike in youth partaking of drugs. They did not become a haven for drug users like the Netherlands did. Maybe they did. Maybe they were putting advertising dollars in for visit Netherlands for the drug experience and got everybody to go that way. But they didn't have any of the problems that had been predicted. And at this point, most of the people there would be opposed to changing the law from what it is. It's decriminalized in the sense that on the books it states that they will not arrest someone for a criminal act such as possession of drugs. It can be a civil matter in which the person can be encouraged to seek treatment, but other than that, they do not enforce any kind of criminal sanctions against anyone. So the Netherlands is a different thing. That is not legalized. Everybody thinks it is, thanks to Harold and Kumar going to different places. But drugs are not legal there. And so when people talk about decriminalization and legalization, I think with decriminalization, in some instances of it, you still have the illicit market going on. So you still have a supply side and the criminal elements providing the drugs, and that brings in a lot of the problems. Whereas if heroin were legal, for example, I don't know what it goes for on the street, but there is going to be a higher cost for the heroin if it's illegal, simply because they're going to charge more because of overhead for transportation, for the reason that they can charge for it, whereas it'd be much less expensive, and junkies, if they're going to get addicted on it, aren't going to have to spend nearly as much. Britain in the 70s had people who were able to get legal prescription for heroin, and a lot of them were employed. They were employed in very simple tasks where they didn't have to concentrate a lot. But it takes out the burglaries and the robberies.
There are, I guess the other part of this is, we're talking about health and we're talking about legal consequences. There are social, in my opinion, and I think in others, there's social and cultural consequences to this. In others, I'm going to give you a story, but a child of an alcoholic is going to tell you that there's consequences in his family. This is a legal product we're talking about here. Sure. There's consequences in his family and how he's brought up and how he's raised and the family dynamic that he experiences in that situation. My wife delivers babies for a living. She has for over 30 years. That child born addicted to some substance, cocaine or something else like that, has a consequence. Now, there may not have been any legal consequence. This mother may never have been charged with a crime because she did that. So you've got those kind of social issues that I think are going to creep up and continue to increase. But the question that I think certainly has to be addressed when you're looking at legalization, and we haven't talked about yet, is we talk about marijuana. Maybe it's, I don't want to say it's benign, but maybe it's one of the more benign of some of the substances we've discussed. But where do you not draw a line on anything? I mean, you're going to make PCP? You make PCP available to anybody and everybody?
We'll get to that in the next segment because we're at the end of the second one.
Okay.
Fluctuations in